might really like these next two videos. They're called Sumi-E, which means in Japanese, black ink painting. And it comes from a very interesting history, originally starting in China, but it's something that Japanese culture adapted and it really became their own. And I can show you in some links below this video some other videos where people use the proper tools to make their Sumi-E paintings. But because I want to make this very accessible to you at home, I'm going to show you ways that you can use watercolor paint or even other craft supply store basic black ink like India ink, or even using the Sumi-E ink, so that you can adapt this to whatever materials that you have around you and still practice the wonderful skill that is the meditative Sumi-E life. Here's what you need to get started. Our goal today is for me to teach you the brush strokes that you need in order to make bamboo and leaves and a general arrangement and do a little bit of practice. When we get started, I actually always try to use an actual Sumi-E brush. These are, they end up being very soft tipped brushes, but when you first buy them, they have some glue in them that it keeps them very formed for shipment so that no bristles would break or get bumped by the cap. So you can get a little bit of water on there and work the glue out if you're using a brush like this for the first time. That's what I do first. I got water in my cup and I just really gave it a nice mix, never smashing it on the bottom. I'm really just floating around in there, sort of in light circles with some motion. And when I pull it out, I'm just giving it a nice twist to keep its shape. My next step is that I'm going to show you how you can use black watercolor paint. And I just happen to use black watercolor paint that came out of a tube. You can also use black watercolor paint that is in a pan. So like I could just get some water and zhuzh this up, you know, getting it to be a really good consistency. This can work as well if this is what you have. You just might need like a little bit of a plastic palette so that you can get a couple different shades of black and gray working from this little case. One truer way to do this is to use black Sumi ink, and that comes in these green bottles with the Japanese label. I will show you some of this too. And some craft stores don't sell that. This is a little easier to find. And what we're doing right here is I put a little bit of water in my black watercolor paint because my paint had dried. And I always call this zhuzhing it up. Always twisting my brush a little bit as I pull the brush out of the paint. And I feel like that's a really good place for us to begin. We need a few different kinds of strokes for Sumi-E painting. We need to be able to make very thin upstrokes and downstrokes. Sometimes broken strokes. So you can take a bit of space on a test piece of paper and practice those strokes, making sure that they're consistent, that you get good angles, and that you get a nice fine line. That's where your pinky resting on the paper. This is how my pinky rests on the paper while I hold my brush. And then my pinky stays clean so I never smear it. My next stroke to practice is the leaf stroke. For the leaf stroke, I press down on my brush and then pull away. That was probably not the best example. There, that's a nicer leaf. So I'm pressing down first and pulling away. That one's not my best. You will be able to judge yours too. See, I got a splatter mark on both of those. That would be too curly for a bamboo leaf. Some of it's also about just getting the right consistency in your paint. That's what our practice sheet's for. All right, moving on to our other test sheet, we're going to just do a little more practice with the bamboo stroke. This is a wider stroke. And I'm always resting my pinky, taking a deep breath before I begin. Okay, I'm going to practice that again. Let's get some more paint. You can have a little bit of a bend in them. And then the last part of the bamboo structure is this very tiny line. So I'm using my pinky finger to rest. A little, very slight squiggle that goes in there. Just like that. And we would let that dry. I want to show you what the difference is between the watercolor paint and when I actually use the Sumi ink, just so you can see it. Mostly you'll see that the ink is much darker, even when it's in the pan. And so what I'm doing here is I'm adding a little bit of water so that I can make a slightly gray version of the ink. And you'll see that I'm about to dip my brush into the gray ink first, totally saturating the brush in gray ink, and then dipping it just the tip into the black ink. And what that should do is give me a really nice two-tone version. Now it looks like I didn't actually give it enough water. So I would probably, if this were a final copy for me, I would do it again. But as I go, you can actually see the third one does start to pick up, where the gray is, it's like grayer on the right and blacker on the left. There you can see that I added the squiggly lines between the bamboo segments, and now I'm adding my stems. The paint is a little bit smoother because it is an ink and not watercolor paint particles being mixed in with water. It's much more saturated, and it has a lot more contrast if you do it on white paper because it just is able to then stand out so much. And so those are the main differences between the two. And here you'll see me do leaves, and then you'll see the finished example. All right, so now that you've seen what the Sumi-E ink looks like compared to the watercolor, I think it's more likely that you might be working with watercolor, so we're going to continue to work with this for our examples. We're going to make a nice square composition with bamboo coming down. If my paper was divided in thirds, 1, 2, so there's 1, 2, 3, we're going to make our bamboo coming down here. Like that. Okay, we're going to put our little lines inside. 3 is a great number to work with in art. So I'm going to have 1 branch here, 1 branch lower, and 1 branch coming off this way. Okay, taking a nice deep breath, I'm just going to put 3 leaves twisting off of this side. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to put a leaf on the top. It's also twisting. That's why they sometimes will alternate these ones. I think that looks nicer. Like that. And turning my paper just so I don't end up smudging what I already did. I'm working over here. 1, 2. I'm going to alternate again. That one, touch that one. Just like that. That's a really nice practice composition, and we continue to work on this in the next lesson. This is a really good place to stop today. Just as important as having good art practices is knowing how to clean your supplies so that you can keep using them. Okay, we're going to clean up our supplies, and I want to keep this. This is really good stuff. And I have one of these. These are like often used for salad dressing at restaurants, and sometimes I keep them because they're really handy for little art containers and it doesn't leak very easily. So I'm just going to keep my extra watercolor ink in this container until tomorrow. I will rinse out this brush in fresh water. All right, and to clean the brush out, I simply cleaned out this cup and got clean water. I'm just going to use the clean water to do a really nice rinse on this brush. Never ever letting it smash to the bottom, just giving it like a nice movement of water to get the paint out, the ink from all of the bristles. As I pull it out, I'm gonna spin, really barely touching it, to reform the bristles of the brush. If you're like me and you want it to stay in good shape and not get ruined, I'm really careful only putting this on a wet formed brush, and then that allows it to still dry because there is a hole here for tomorrow for our next lesson. So you can go ahead and dump this and clean this out, and I'll meet you back here tomorrow to continue working on our Sumi-E Zen painting. If you want to follow up with the second lesson, that's where I'll teach you how to make more final compositions.